Thanks, Emma. So I've got half an hour for you all to field individually, if you like, or all as one group, your questions. I've found it really interesting today, and just to let you know, I'm not here from the perspective of being a cloud expert, so I've probably got as many questions as you have. But naturally, the floor's open to you. If anyone has any burning questions that they'd like to kick the panel off with, then that would be great, so start thinking. I'm going to ask each of the panel to introduce themselves. We've got one mic, and they have to pass it down, unfortunately. And we have a ruling. We're going to hopefully only have them speaking for 2 minutes maximum on any one question. So no great sort of diatribes today. And we're going to have a 20-second warning as well when it comes up to the 2 minutes. So be prepared. So anyway, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll get on with the questions as soon as we've done that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Clark. I'm responsible for cloud for IBM in the UK. And good afternoon. I'm looking forward to having some questions from you.
Hi, Stefan Hase, Product Director at Intechnology. We deliver cloud-based IT services in the UK.
Hi, Simon May. I explain the cloud to IT professionals in the UK for Microsoft.
Hi, Steve Smith from SunGard Availability Services. I'm a solutions architect, and I architect solutions for our customers in and around our infrastructure as a service cloud offerings.
Hi, I'm Matt McNeil from Google. I'm the EMEA lead for our enterprise solutions practice. So I'm working with customers, understanding how they're implementing cloud and some of our other solutions as well.
Thank you, chaps. Hold on to that, and whoever gets the next question will have to pass it down. So anyone out there would like to fire a question off? Anyone want to get something, the proceedings underway? I'm looking around. Was there one over there? Lovely, if you can do a runner down there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So it's for the panel in general, really, and that is, we seem to be going a little bit backwards in terms of identity and access management, where cloud providers are each doing it all in a different way, and we could end up with a situation where we have unique username and password on all of these different systems. How does the panel see that getting addressed?
Okay. I think if I could let Simon have a go at that one, that'd be great.
So I think you've got a really good point there. Identity is a huge problem, and one that needs to be addressed by anybody who's thinking about moving anything into the cloud. We're very lucky because Microsoft holds something called Active Directory. So most organizations have implemented Active Directory, which is most organizations' single point of reference for identity, or at least it should be. And you'd expect that that could be leveraged by lots of different cloud services in order to provide identity and access control, and all of those requirements can be addressed by it. And actually, within the Microsoft platform, that's exactly what you can do. Something like Windows Azure can actually allow you to do something called Active Directory Federation Services, and federate the Active Directory without putting it at risk onto the internet, so that people can use their Active Directory credentials to sign into an application that's provided through Windows Azure. But that's actually quite an open framework, so anybody could then go and take that and build their own service to use that. So if they wanted to go and use it on AWS, fine, they could do. Very similar for our Office 365 offering, whereby that identity piece is baked in right from the very beginning. If you're a large organization, you want to enable that single sign-on, then you can do. It's totally baked into the beginning of the product. However, if you're one of those organizations that doesn't have that single point of contact, that single identity, then you don't have to take it. You've got that choice. I would really recommend that anybody that's making moves to any kind of cloud solution look at identity. I think it's one of the most important aspects of moving into any cloud solution.
Anyone else like to have a go? Matt.
Yeah, I think identity is a key issue, and certainly, the way we look at the world at Google is identity comes first. You can't construct security without identity first. You shouldn't be able to put data into any cloud without it being secured to an identity or an individual. So our approach really is to try and be as open as possible. Where there's open standards, we try and support them. So whether that's OAuth or these sort of things, SSO and single sign-on solutions. And we also have tools which will federate with Active Directory and so on to make that very straightforward for people out there who are on those systems. So it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. I think if we can get to a point where there's an open standard which is agreed across the board, then that's better for everyone.
Okay. Anyone else?
Since I have the mic and it is passing through
Past
me,
you. Yeah.
so to speak, I would just say I think there's some very good points being made there. I think also we need to be a little careful that we perhaps lift the level of authorization of enterprise cloud architectures above the user base and perhaps have almost a dual level of authentication. There's one thing authenticating users and there's one thing authenticating people who are responsible for management and control of that environment. And I think perhaps to try and consolidate that all in one go is a little bit of a step. But I do take the point that certainly we need to look to consolidate these within infrastructures.
Okay. Well, what I'm not going to do is ask every panellist to answer the question, because I think maybe we'll all start to get to the point where we're all trying to answer the same question. I must admit that federation concept is amazing, the way it scales, not just between systems, but between organisations and then between maybe countries in due course. Who knows? You just don't know where it could go. And it's a huge problem that needs to be overcome. So we're looking to our experts and their companies to resolve that. So any more questions that people would like to ask? Another one over there.
If I may, I'd like to extend the question slightly.
Okay.
Because this colleague here asked about identity and access management, and the panel had talked about federated identity. But then when we go on to think about delivering integrated solutions that use some public cloud services and private cloud, whatever, we also want to be able to federate out roles and things like that and drive what people can do based on our central databases. Does anyone want to extend their answer?
Any extensions, or would someone else like a try? Stefan, go on, have a go.
It's a very good question. That you will find that in the end of the day, the customers and yourselves will be quite often left, well, to be honest, that's your problem. One service provider like us, for example, we will say, this is the way we can bring you now into our environment. We normally sort of extend your own private domain into our cloud. So it's basically, if it's just another remote site to you. So therefore, from a network as well as from an access point of view, it just pretends to be another part of your network. However, then when you then look at a public cloud interface, the only way you can authenticate is obviously through your own environment. There wouldn't be any authentication between our environment and another environment. So therefore, the only way you can do that is back into your environment, which means the problem in that case would unfortunately lie with yourselves.
Okay.
And from an IBM point of view, we've recently had an announcement with regards to working in this sort of hybrid cloud environment, just sort of touching on, and from a Tivoli toolset point of view, we just extended some of the features to enable you to do that. So from that centralized sort of command and control within the private cloud environment you've got, it's allowing you to punch out when you do burst out of your private cloud into public. It takes that same command and control features and functionality with it, and therefore should give you that confidence that it's a sort of one-stop shop, if you like.
Does that sort you out, or would you like to take that further?
We're getting to road. We're all on the road.
Okay, yeah, I agree. So anyone else who would like to answer a question? I mean, this is a great opportunity. Farid?
There's lots of security standards around the globe, and they're continually changing and being updated, etc., etc. We're going to start our journey. In 6 months' time, these standards change. What can we do to our provider? What can we say to them? Are they still accredited? Where's the risk to my organisation?
While you've got the mic.
I'm not sure whether you were in Nick's presentation this morning, but as we just said, it's a continuum. It's a matter really of having security designed in at the beginning and all working with the standards as they are today. As those standards evolve and tighten up, it's a continuum, constant requirement for you to be ensuring you're up to speed and compliant, basically, for your own benefit or from your hoster or supplier's benefit, making sure that that's in place. It's not at this snapshot in time, it is that continuum.
From our point of view, you're absolutely right. Security accreditations are very, very important, but at the same time, they are still reasonably high level. They make sure that you apply common sense in your environment. That you protect your customers' data, you protect your own data, you take normal common sense precautions. I think the real proof is always to test an environment, to actually see, can I access it from anywhere else? Is it actually secure? How can I protect my data across multiple data centers? How can I actually recover my data? Is there an audit trail? All those kind of things. High-level accreditations, that's all great. You need them to make sure you have the ground basic level approval of the industry standard. But then it really goes into the nitty-gritty detail, which you need to test your service provider on.
I think I'd answer that by suggesting that there's kind of 3 levels of requirements that you should be looking for there from the service provider. The first one is accreditations, second is attestations, and thirdly, are they auditable? And that last one for me is one of the key things when you're looking for them. Have they got independent third parties coming in to audit their facilities? To give you a good example of that, the British Standards Institute comes in to audit the Microsoft data centers to make sure that we are actually adhering to the standards that we set out. And we publish those standards as well. They're available for people to download off of the websites for Global Foundation Services, who are our internal department that run our data centers. But the other thing that's absolutely critical, and the IBM presentation earlier was by far one of the best that I've seen on this, understanding governance, risk and compliance for your specific organisation and your specific industry is a massive part of your job. It's a huge part of what you give to your business in terms of the value that you add, and you should never take your eye off that. You've always got to be making sure that the service providers are kept honest. Most of the time they are, but also that they're meeting the needs of your business.
Okay. On this occasion, it's a very interesting topic. I'm going to let the mic carry on to the end of...
I would just say quickly, I think you need a provider who's willing to support you in gaining any accreditation that you need for your solution. As Simon said, that's completely specific to your organisation, your structure, and the business that you operate in. I think that really is the most important thing, aside from classic data centre authentication, the SAS 70 accreditations, all of the ticks in the boxes that no doubt you'll research with a provider. I think you should look for a commitment to support you in having additional audits and complying with whatever security policy that you need to. And I think that's pretty much common practice in the kind of T's and C's that I see around these days.
So I totally concur that the importance of having third-party reports, auditing, doing the due diligence is a key part. But the way I look at it is I think there's 2 sort of conversations. One is the sort of security, if you like, and compliance with that. And the second is regulation and compliance with that. And the regulatory is a more interesting area, and certainly from our perspective, where we're coming, I suppose, from a cloud-first, pure cloud offering. Some of the regulation which governs some industries simply was written 15 years ago before Google was even a company. So what we are seeing, I think you picked up, is huge change, actually, as this is now being revisited, because those industries are being held out of opportunities, really, to gain efficiencies within their business because of the way it was written, and it just takes time to update it. And it's a good thing it takes time in some respects, because these are not things to be rushed. These are things to be thought through and done properly. But I'm pretty sure it will be done.
Okay. Thanks for that, Matt. And Doug just wanted to say one last thing, so you can pass that back down. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when Nick presented some data, some charts this morning that had the little logo at the bottom, X-Force. I mean, there's one thing you want to try out, is just find out how vulnerable you are and invite our X-Force to come in and penetrate you. They're called white hats, so they can leave you the little black magic card on the desk as they leave. But
Right.
give it a go. I mean, that'll show you just how vulnerable you are.
Okay, so you'll show your penetration expertise. That'll be interesting. So moving on, are there any people with burning questions? Someone out there who must have something. There we go, sir.
A good measure of a company is how they respond when there's a problem. Now, obviously, there's the well-publicised, looking at a couple of guys on the panel, outages, should we call them? And the response was, unlucky, it's down. Now, from a company if we've decided to go to cloud and it's down, have you all taken out massive insurance policies when you're sued?
Well, the key protagonists.
So the reality is IT goes down. You know, it goes down in everyone's businesses. But the thing about the public cloud is it's public and it's transparent about what happens. So, yes, there was a docs outage for, I think, 34 minutes the other day. I think, you know, for the proportion of people that were affected, they would have not been able to access those through the docs list for 34 minutes. Now, as far as we're concerned, we count that as a complete outage of the complete platform, and that's the way we count it. But what you've got to look at, I suppose, is the reliability. I think the big fear is a sense of loss of control because you're moving out of a situation where typically we've been able to go down the data center and kick some servers or whatever, or even ring the outsourcing provider and harass them because we know, the account managers. Well, we have account managers too, which you can harass. But the reality is I actually sit on some of the feeds as these escalations occur, and the efficiency with which they get sorted is incredible. So it is 34 minutes, and that counts. And we'd rather it was 0. Our SLAs are complete real uptime, as in we don't do planned downtime. So anything counts. You don't get, it's not going to be working, between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. On Saturday night. Because actually, for some people, it's not 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. on Saturday night. It's right in the middle of a working day, or, in the middle of the day. So you can't look at it in those terms, I think, anymore with regard to global systems. Transparency is key. Knowing what's going on is key. You have a duty to inform your users, your people, what's happening, what the latest is. And we publish that publicly so anyone can go look at it at any time. And internally with our larger accounts, we have dedicated account managers who also give an inside track on that as well, if any other information is needed. This is the enterprise. We need to be responsive.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Simon.
When you said that, that's all well and good, but if you've got an aircraft wants to send some information back to base on one of its engines,
Yep.
It's a bit difficult to say, hang on for 34 minutes, we'll be back to you.
Yeah.
And for me, the key point there was the public cloud. And let's be fair, cloud is a euphemism for hosted services.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing, you're getting into it. And the majority of people are saying, well, okay, it isn't public, then it isn't hybrid, it's actually a private, which is what you've got anyway when you've got on-site stuff. So, the SLA in your private cloud may be so expensive that you can't actually ever go to it. So you be careful with, because I've noticed over the last year and a half, things have moved from it's the answer to a maiden's prayers to you may want to get onto it, but be careful because there's all this security and there's lots of jobs for services and lawyers, etc. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you can't sue your own company, but you can sue a provider.
Absolutely right. And, if you're running a fleet of aircraft with critical information, you'd probably want systems which are, don't rely on your office mail systems to do that. So no one's saying this is the one solution to every problem today. No one's saying that. And I think it would be a misrepresentation if people did. But for a vast majority of use cases, there are benefits and efficiencies that you can get out of it. I would not advise you to put your aircraft safety systems on any public cloud or even any private cloud, because as you rightly say, the cost of transferring that risk is so significant that people don't tend to outsource a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think part of that comes back to what Stefan was saying earlier, that you pick your package holiday according to what you want to do, and that's one you wouldn't necessarily want to do the straightforward option with EasyJet or whatever. No offence, EasyJet, if you're in here. Simon, I think.
I'd answer that in a two-part answer, actually. And one is to answer that application question separately in a second. The first one about outages or downtime and all that kind of stuff. We do very much the same as what Google do. We don't have maintenance periods. We keep the system up all the time. We don't do planned maintenance because we've designed the infrastructure not to need us to take the infrastructure down to do that planned maintenance. What we do that's slightly different, and according to the contract, what the guys who experienced I think off the top of my head, it was a 2.5 hour outage for North America last week. What we will do, according to the contract for those guys, is actually pay them back for the cost of their service. They'll get a credit note. And that means that we're actually taking that money off the bottom line cost of the service for that period, which is great. And it goes a good way towards meeting their business requirement for it. It's still not as good as having uptime. And everybody in the data centers, everybody in Microsoft is absolutely concerned about that uptime. Not least because we don't want the COO to keep getting phone calls at 2 in the morning from various clients. It's not a good thing. From the other side, the application issue. As you guys know, you make massive engines for, well, carrying lots of people all over the world. That's life-critical stuff. When you're designing and architecting a system around that, you actually architect for things to go wrong. You build an airplane with 2 engines, and one of them can carry on its own. So in terms of what you do with that data, that logging information, you'd probably log it out locally into the black box flight recorder of that aircraft, and then that can get downloaded when that aircraft lands on the ground. That's an architectural decision because people designed the system to be able to cope when it goes wrong. Exactly the same way as we have when we build these large cloud architectures. So in terms of how do you do that, how do you put your trust in the public cloud? Well, you do it by ensuring you do things in a really good way. You build really good applications that leverage the cloud to give you all the advantages without the disadvantages.
The problem is by building that into the cloud and making it so expensive, you wouldn't know the cloud.
Potentially. Maybe it does. But that's, again, it's an architectural decision. There's a right way to pick things at the right time, and every organisation has to assess that on an individual basis. You're absolutely right.
I think the key thing is that cloud providers have sold us the concept that they're raising the level, the bar, to something above what we could provide in some respects. And so I suppose we're just saying we don't expect you to have outages because we think you've got the ultimate resilience, ultimate redundancy, and it's been proven wrong, I suppose. And in one respect, that's disappointing for us because then I suppose we look at things like security when you go, we've got the ultimate security, and then we say, well, can we believe this? I don't know if we come back to security again and that side of things. So I suppose that's where you're coming from to a certain extent. Now, I'm very conscious that it must be my sort of imposing personality or whatever, that all the questions have come from this side so far and none from this side. So would someone like to stick their hand up and ask a question? There we go. We've got 2 now. There we go.
There's been a lot of talk regarding sort of data protection where data is held and hosted, and yet we talk about the cloud and it's on the internet, it's a worldwide thing. Is anything being done by anybody to try and sort of get some kind of agreements or securities passed so that we can go into the cloud with data that's sensitive to the UK and it could be hosted anywhere, but there's still guarantees and the government's happy with it?
Did everyone hear that before we move on? Yeah, just so you know, it was a question about data, where you're holding it, and whether you can hold it outside the UK, and whether there are some agreements or something is being done to help us with regard to where our data is being stored. So I think, Steve, we'll let you have a go.
As a quick answer, yeah, I can't see that ever changing. I think the latest government guidelines are very much based around the data stays in the country of origin. Government systems are built on that basis. I can't see a technical change which is going to allow us to break those barriers and shift data overseas. Probably be the last export from the country as the economy turns the lights out, frankly.
Okay. Stefan, do you want to go?
From our point of view, it's reasonably easy to answer that question since we are a purely UK-based organisation. But we have got a large number of legal customers, for example, legal firms. A lot of them have got either dependencies abroad or actually headquartered abroad. And they quite easily sort of stipulate, you've got to make sure that data stays and resides within the UK. And that's part of the service they actually subscribe to. And for them, obviously, that's why some of the public cloud services are simply not viable, simply because you have got no control of where that data actually resides. And more importantly, now we come to the things like the Patriot Act, can you actually prevent external agencies like the US, for example, accessing that data in the UK? So from our point of view, it's UK-based service and it resides under UK law, not any sort of international law. And I think that's absolutely vital for certain organisations to have that assurance.
Okay, Doug, you haven't had a chance recently.
No.
Have a go.
So this isn't just a cloud issue. I think it's exacerbated by cloud, okay? But it would be exactly the same if we were talking about outsourcing or anything else. So I think the key thing is, and again, it kind of reflects a little bit back on Nick's presentation this morning, which was predominantly about security, but he was really talking about being compliant and being within, you know, the bounds of legislation, all the rest of it. And it's all to do with, and I was going to come back to Steve's point as well, it all comes back to making something fit for purpose, you know, compliant with the legislation as it might be today, whether that's to do with where the data resides or whether it's to do with the design of the system or anything else. But, you know, be compliant with today, take the best counsel you can, both from your own businesses but also from your suppliers. And we're more than happy to provide all sorts of legal counsel and support and guidance from our side within the design. That's in our interest to do so as much as in yours. And just keep abreast of that and keep it in sight so that as things change, as things evolve, you're always going to be up with it and not, you know, not finding yourself in a sticky situation. And I think, you know, if I was here talking about the Patriot Act, the first thing our legal counsel would be is say, well, that's our space, not yours, and we're the ones to give you advice and support on it. And we will, you know, our legal counsel will talk to your legal counsel and work out what the right approach and the right design is.
Okay.
And I think just going back to Steve's point, because I was desperate to get the microphone, I think it, you know, cloud doesn't blinker us from doing good computer science. And I think things like ITIL and all the policies and procedures and best practices that we all as professionals have developed over a vast number of years cannot be just turned off overnight because you can go and buy something over the internet with a credit card. I think all of that design has to be built still in the process, and probably even more than before.
Because the danger is that the board, they think IT provides a solution, but it doesn't. It's an enabler. You have to get your data sorted, your rules of engagement sorted, your structure, your architecture, your organisation, your legal features before you move to it. And people think that they can move a bad system to cloud, it will be a good system, and they won't.
I think it's got a red card.
Red card. Another question down here, I think.
Insurance. I'd like to put to the panel the issue that what we've been addressing so far has been production systems. The reality is in a lot of medium and large companies, we have big data, large data warehouses. One of the problems that I see again and again is moving refreshes of the production data down from the data centre to a locally hosted data centre that hosts test and development environments. And invariably that can be quite an arduous and long-winded process because of the size of the pipe that it connects to. How do you see getting around this problem with the cloud? It's essentially got a production system in the different data centres where testing and development is being done again.
Right. Doug, I think you need to pass that away now. I think so.
Thank you.
Someone down that way. Stefan, have a go.
I'm more than happy to answer that. From our point of view, the network is the enabler of everything, and every customer that we are dealing with today, they were a network customer in the first place. Likely we're going to sell more than one service at the same time, but it's the network that actually enables it. And you're right, so 5-10 years ago, when there was pretty much one supplier, one successful supplier, who delivered small pipes at very expensive prices, to today, where you have a range of suppliers, where you can get 100 meg, gig, or even 10 gig connections for affordable rates. I think that problem is predominantly overcome, certainly in most metropolitan areas, but even in smaller cities. So the test and development environment doesn't necessarily have to be next to the next production environment, and because indeed most customer organizations have got 100 meg or maybe gigabit LAN connections, and that's exactly the same you can extend into your data center. So I think that's a problem that can commercially be overcome these days.
I guess there's a point with this at which it becomes cheaper to FedEx data than it does to actually buy a pipe that's big enough to send the data along. And we certainly see that is a solution that some people want to adopt. And that's a really difficult thing to do with a public cloud data center, because how do you get the data on them? For me, one of the solutions to that is actually a synchronization solution. So keep your private version, your test version, if that's what you're doing in your private version, in sync with your live version. And then when you actually need to perform the test, perform a cutoff, and then once you've completed the test, you just need to reflect delta changes back again. So that can actually be a really nice, simple solution for doing that kind of thing. And if you look around at the data marketplace, some solutions doing the sales thing like SQL actually allow you to do that. We have a product called SQL Data Sync, which allows you to take your on-premises SQL Server data and keep it synchronized with a SQL Azure database in the cloud. And those two will stay completely in sync, bit for bit, byte for byte. So that, for me, would be the easy way of doing it. Break it up, small chunks, do it over time.
Okay, thank you. Steve, one more, and you'll have to wait. I'm sorry, Matt.
I have to say, in the kind of solutions that I've been involved in, the solutions to that generally, because there tend to be concerns not just about your code, or your testing environment, but also the management infrastructure you've got in place around that production environment. And there can be some big changes between moving away from that production environment to a dev test environment. So very often you want a very sort of small, slick, pre-production test environment which is hosted by the same guys running your production infrastructure, and then do all the kind of, the much more long-winded dev testing back at site. I think you need a mini pre-production environment, otherwise you're asking for trouble when you try and push it into the managed environment when it's previously been owned by a bunch of developers who may or may not be quite so careful as some IT professionals. That's the way I like to do it. You may not want to pay to do that, but that's the way I like to do it.
Sound advice. Matt, you look like you were burning to answer this one, but...
No, I was just saying, don't move it. Same. Do your dev and test in the cloud. And, we deal with a lot of big data at Google, as you can imagine. If you think about the click streams off the major properties, or what our log data looks like, you don't want to move that around.
Safe advice as well. Now, the final challenge then, because I've been given the 5-minute warning, I think we have one more question availability, and I was going to try and say no one at the back, but I think this gentleman's beaten me to it.
We don't move across data centers very often, but how about if I plan to move from one cloud provider to another one? What are the costs involved in that, and are there any standardizations? Or are there proprietary infrastructures within for a cloud provider? Because when I move from one data center to the other, it's not much of an hassle to me. There is a hassle, but then that's known because it has been going on for a while. The cloud is something new. If I want to switch from cloud A to cloud B, say from Microsoft to IBM or from Microsoft to Google, or so on and so forth, are there proprietary technological stacks, or they are standardized? So probably 5 years down the line, I am with Microsoft today, and I might want to move on to Google after 5 years. So, I mean, what's my risk if I put all my eggs into the same basket?
Okay, Matt.
I think the first thing to say is the data's yours. You should be able to do what you want with it. So let's talk about getting people on. What we offer within the Google stack is a whole set of tools to take you from major platforms that are on today, migration tools and things like that to help. They're well tested and they're used widely. So in a sense, getting in, I suspect everyone can do that. It'd be a problem if they couldn't. But the most important thing, I think, is the point you raised about getting out as well. And at Google, we have something very fundamental that you shouldn't be able to put data in our systems that you can't get out. So we are not allowed to launch products without there being a way of getting the data out in open formats or where standard formats are available in those standard formats. The vision really should be that if you ever want to move, it should be as much as a click of a button. But that's an ecosystem question. All we can do is provide the interfaces, programmatic interfaces, to enable you to get the data you own out of the systems as and when you want.
I suppose one of the questions there is how far off a reality is that actually?
It's already there. Just look at data liberation on Google, for Google, and all that's there for us.
Okay. Simon, I think you're probably involved in that side of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you're moving your data into a cloud, you need to be thinking up front what would happen if everything goes wrong. Obviously, we hope that that doesn't happen. Everybody hopes that nothing is going to go wrong that's going to cause you to move away. But looking at that another way, there might be other reasons why you need to be able to access that data in a more standard way. So perhaps you need to be able to extend that system with some new piece of technology that comes along which needs to access it. If you're putting data onto the internet, you might as well make it so that it's accessible through lots of different avenues. So the use of APIs is a really fantastic way to do that. Building your own, it's a very, very established way of creating an application interface to pull that information out. And if you ever needed to exit the cloud, well, you could probably do it in a very similar way to that yourself. The thought around, and that's from the application side, the thought around the software as a services side and that kind of data is, for me, slightly more interesting, because we're actually talking about not just getting out the raw data, the bits and the bytes. You actually want to make sure that things don't get changed when you move on to another system. And that's a really tricky thing to do. There are open standards now that underpin most document formats. So actually, when you have one document and you upload it into a different cloud system, you want to make sure that you don't lose any of the fidelity, any of the quality of that document when you're moving between systems. So I do think you need to think about what you're doing before you start to make that move.
Great. And are we going to have a fight for this?
Yeah,
Final
let's
question.
have a fight.
Just
I
quickly then, because
think I
I'm
won.
conscious. How are we doing for time, Emma?
Exit strategy, right,
Okay.
is absolutely vital. You need to consider that at the beginning of the process. From our point of view, I think it's important to use technologies that are pretty much standardized out there, that are widely taken up. So we use things like HP servers, we use VMware, for example, for the virtualization layer, that would allow us to migrate data from your existing physical or virtual servers into our cloud, but the same token will allow you then afterwards, should you want to exit, to move the data out of the cloud exactly in the same fashion. So it's not just based on the data level, it's actually based at the platform level. And it's not bespoke, it's not kind of like, something that we thought of, it's something where we use best of breed technologies to enable you to move out of the cloud again, should you wish to do so.
Great. Final comment.
Yeah, final comment. Rather than thinking about it from moving from one supplier to another supplier, Ashok, think about it in terms of even within if you build a private cloud to start with and then you want to migrate some of those workloads and put them into a shared private cloud or into a public cloud because you're confident you can do that, then tools like Cast Iron are ideal for that, daisy chaining the different sort of cloud infrastructures together. So I think, we'll all get much more experience in doing that going forwards, but that's the sort of thing I would suggest.
Lovely. Okay. Well, I think Emma's lurking in the wings there. And so all it is, thanks for everyone for asking your questions, and thanks very much. I hope you'll join me in thanking the panel for their contribution. Thank you.